Corpus Christi City Council has delayed a vote on water curtailment percentage. One case of measles has been confirmed in the Rio Grande Valley, and Victoria County commissioners have approved a tax abatement for an ammonia plant project. This is South Texas Midday. I'm Rob Boskamp. Thank you for joining me. It's Wednesday, April 29th. Corpus Christi City Council met on Tuesday. They delayed a vote on an ordinance that would have set monthly water rations during a Level 1 water emergency. Concerns included $500 citations per violation per day, surcharges, and residents' water possibly being shut off for noncompliance. The council will attempt to vote on the curtailment percentage at the next meeting on May 5th. Officials continue to outline and define the city's drought contingency plans should the city declare a water emergency in the coming months. September is the latest projection date.
A couple of things we need to remember is Level 1 water emergency is when we are 6 months away from supply not meeting demand. At that date doesn't mean the system changes at all, pressures remain consistent, the water is still there. 180 days from there, we still have water. The goal of establishing baselines and curtailment is to assure that water will remain there and the system remains stable until we bring on new water supplies.
That was Corpus Christi Water Chief Operating Officer Nick Winkleman speaking Tuesday. Council members and water officials have assured residents they will have water courtesy of sources like Lake Texana, which is 64.6% capacity, and the lower Colorado River. Local sources like Lake Corpus Christi and Choke Canyon Reservoir continue to be in the single-digit capacities. Meanwhile, City Manager Peter Zanoni left Tuesday's meeting early to attend a preliminary hearing in Sinton regarding protests filed against permits for the $650 million Evangeline groundwater project in San Patricio County. That project would provide the city of Corpus Christi with up to 24 million gallons of water per day. Opposition mainly has come from the city of Sinton and the St. Paul Water Supply Corporation. The judge reviewed 3 protests filed concerning well drilling and transportation permits associated with the project. The purpose of the preliminary hearing was to determine whether each protest has legal standing to challenge the permits. The administrative law judge heard from both sides Tuesday and will write a detailed ruling within the next 10 business days. Meanwhile, other developments from Corpus Christi City Council meeting included the approval of $250,000 to increase access to free spay and neuter services for local pet owners. The funding will be split equally between the Cattery Inc. and the South Texas Animal Rescue Group to provide services on behalf of Corpus Christi Animal Care Services. Services will be provided at no cost to residents living in specific areas with the highest need, based on an analysis of household income and the volume of animal-related service calls. The program will primarily focus on residents in Council Districts 1, 2, and 3. Health officials in the Rio Grande Valley have identified a case of the measles. The Cameron County Public Health Department confirmed one case in the area on Tuesday. A news release states the case is linked to a resident living outside of Texas who traveled from a state with recent measles cases. The individual was quarantined. It's unknown whether or not they were vaccinated. The department is working closely with the Texas Department of State Health Services to identify any individuals who may have been exposed. 25 News Now reports that a $1 billion ammonia plant project at the Port of Victoria is one step closer to reality. On Monday, Victoria County Commissioners approved a 100% 10-year tax abatement for First Ammonia Corp. Instead of traditional taxes, the company will make annual payments in lieu of taxes of $780,000 to the county. Victoria Economic Development Corporation President Jonas Titus said the plant will create about 50 high-paying jobs in Victoria. And continuing on with water concerns across the region, today after South Texas Midday, KEDT's Spencer Chihawk and Rio Grande Valley Business Journal reporter Kristen Mossbrucker Garza talk about a newly proposed seawater desalination plant project in the valley that could eventually bring in 100 million gallons of water per day. Here's Kristen speaking about the differences of the project from the Inner Harbor Desalination Plant project in Corpus Christi.
They're drawing directly from the ocean, not a canal. They are discharging back into the ocean. They're also, positioning it on the far north side of South Padre Island that there's really not much up there. Like, this is not going next to anyone's house or anything. And honestly, I think the other piece of it is I was at an event recently where they were announcing that they had secured the land that I wouldn't say that it's non-controversial, but there has already been a regional backing, at least politically, to move this project forward.
You can hear more from that interview following South Texas Midday. Most people have had a fever at some point and probably see it as a sign of trouble to come. Dr. Zachary Costin, a family medicine physician with Baylor, Scott & White, recently wrote an article on the company's blog explaining what a fever is in hopes of easing fear about it. He spoke to Sam Baker in this week's segment of KERA's Vital Signs.
A fever is just your body's physiological response to trying to deal with an invader. Your thalamus, which regulates a lot of different things in your body that you don't have control over, kicks into gear and says, hey, I'm going to turn up the heat on this invader and let's see if we can essentially cook it.
Can I self-diagnose myself? Would I know that I have a fever?
You certainly can have a subjective fever where you can feel really hot or you can feel really cold. A really good objective way to know is actually to check your temperature and really validate that. You don't have to come into a clinic setting to do that, but a thermometer would really be of benefit just at validating, hey, I feel this way, but is this actually what's taking place?
I suspect most people view a fever as a bad thing, a sign of physical trouble. You say, well, no, or not necessarily.
We certainly don't have to be fever phobic, so to speak, but the fever can kind of be a canary in the coal mine for an issue. But the fever in and of itself doesn't typically pose too much threat. We certainly can allow ourselves to experience that fever, and possibly we're dealing with a viral infection where that can resolve on its own after just some time and some support. But certainly if the fever persists, right, all right, then it deserves some additional attention because there may be a different type of infection present, something bacterial that could warrant some antibiotics.
How long does or can a fever last?
As long as the fever has not lasted 5 days, it's usually reassuring. But certainly if that fever is persisting beyond 5 days, that can be a clue that there's a bigger issue present for which you might need some antibiotics or some additional evaluation.
Which kind of brings me to the next thing I was going to ask you. How do you break a fever?
There's a couple ways to do that, right? One, maintaining adequate hydration, because if our body temperature is higher, that means we're using water to better carry out its processes more frequently.
Water, or will any type of liquid do?
Ideally water, but as long as there's not a high caffeine concentration, liquid is liquid. Just try to keep your urine as clear as possible. Moving into a cooler environment, that's another really good way to try and help lower your body's internal temperature. And then as well, you can take over-the-counter medications that can help lower your fevers, things like Tylenol, Motrin, naproxen. But there's definitely caveats to that. For instance, pediatric patients, we really don't advise ibuprofen or Motrin use below the age of 6 just because the children's kidneys have not developed appropriately. And then as well, we don't advise aspirin because you can get some really severe complications from that, especially with the pediatric population.
When should you really worry about a fever?
If there's any sign of confusion, if you have a skin eruption, like if you have a rash that suddenly showed up that wasn't there previously, if there's any unexplained bleeding in your person, but they don't have any history of any trauma, they didn't bump into anything or anything like that, there wasn't any injury, if the blood pressure is lowering, those are signs to really be worried. Or if the fever is as high as 104 and is not coming down with medication. So you give the fever medication either to yourself or to a child. Ideally within an hour, that temperature should be coming down. And if it's not, that's cause for consideration for being seen.
Dr. Zachary Costin is a family medicine physician with Baylor, Scott & White. And that is the latest news and information on South Texas Midday. I'm Rob Boskamp, your community arts calendar, and more is on the way.